Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. Some of you have wondered just how dark the Three Martini Lunch might be today, given the agonizing ways that the Jets lost in the early game and the Bears lost in the late afternoon game. And Jim, agonizing is a good word for both of them. Jets losing at New England, which is not a good team, and the Bears losing on a very bizarre Hail Mary to the Commanders yesterday here just outside of D.C. I've always been very grateful for my small group Bible study, which meets once a month on Sundays, and it meets in the early evenings. And so I missed the entire game. If I had actually had to sit there and watch that, only to have my guts ripped out at the end, I would be feeling much worse today. So it's a little less painful for me, but as I've mentioned a couple of times, the Bears have a much easier first half of their schedule than the second half, and so you got to grab these wins when you can. So not helpful.
Greg, first of all, when it comes to the Jets, I'm just dead inside. I can't. There's nothing left. There's no caring. There's no more hope, no more optimism. I can't even start thinking about. But being a Jets fan means the season is over before Halloween, and you're already looking at college football and thinking about who you want to draft. That's how things go. The other thing's going to be really tough for you guys is that, look, if you're a Commanders fan, that was one of the most spectacular end of the game plays of all time. And so this is going to be like Jaden Daniels looks like a star. And for the rest of his life, when they put together highlight reels, that play is going to be on it. And you're going to see that play living in this area for the rest of your life. That's a rough way. It's kind of like the Marino fake spike play back in 94. People will be talking about it for the rest of time.
Yes, it's not good for me, but it's even worse for the Chicago Nickelback, who was taunting the crowd as the play was unfolding, and then raced over to try and break up the play and was the one who tipped it to the guy who got it for the touchdown. If he still has a job this morning, I'm going to be surprised. But anyway, let's get to our big three stories today. And Jim, let's begin with just the story that never stops, because Kamala Harris has still not figured out how to position herself with respect to Joe Biden. Because as soon as he announced he wasn't going to run, Joe Biden's one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, certainly in the modern age. Everybody on the left was trying to say that to soothe his ego as they shoved him to the curb and stomped him on the back as they tossed him out like yesterday's trash. Then, of course, as you suggested, she's trying to thread the needle here by never criticizing anything that he did, but trying to say that she'd be different, but can't say how she'd be different. Well, now Joe Biden wants to play a role in the final days of the campaign. And the Harris campaign is like, who is this again? I'm not familiar with the name. Axios with the story. President Biden wants to campaign for Vice President Harris in the last days before the election. And Harris's campaign keeps responding, hey, we'll get back to you, according to three people familiar with the dynamic. And Axios says this matters because Harris's team believes that Biden is a political liability at a crucial time in the campaign, but is reluctant to directly say they don't want him to campaign for her. And it's understandable. I mean, his approval rating stinks. We just saw the stat in the Bret Baier interview with Harris that 79% of Americans think the country's on the wrong track. So being arm in arm with the guy that people blame for that in large respect isn't helpful. But man, this is just getting more and more awkward, which makes it more and more fun. Where's the popcorn?
So I imagine this is coming from Biden himself. I imagine he's getting regularly briefed on how the campaign is going. And he's like, why won't they let me go out there? And I'd really like to know, Biden, where do you think you'd help? Where do you think you are popular? And you getting out on the trail is going to move the numbers in the right direction for. I'm sure he would say Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm sure he'd say they love me in Pennsylvania. You got to remind him that he won Pennsylvania by about 1% last time. And that he is not, like, one of the things, previewing a potential column in the works here. In 2016, the Hillary Clinton campaign was utterly convinced that Donald Trump was going to be easy to beat. Surprise, he was not. Heading into Election Day 2020, Biden was way ahead by a wide margin. And then he won by the skin of his teeth in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona and Georgia. He won by, a decent amount in the national popular vote. And the Electoral College by itself was a fairly wide margin. But all of those individual states came down to like very low five-figure totals out of millions cast. And then here we are. It is end of October, and it's neck and neck. The Sunbelt states are looking pretty good for Trump. The blue wall might hold for Kamala Harris. You don't know, right? So Trump is a much tougher guy to beat than Democrats want to believe. So Joe Biden's belief, I can go out there and I can help her anywhere. Where? And I just want to observe that we are days away. If Trump wins, the Joe Biden legacy gets altered dramatically. And all of a sudden, he's the guy who beat Trump, but he's also the guy who set the stage for the Trump resurgence and the Trump return. And that, because of bad immigration policies, because of high inflation, because of chaos overseas, he set the stage. And, Harris went in there and the poll numbers improved, got it to neck and neck. Because remember, he was losing before the debate, and then he went out in the debate and had turned in the worst performance anybody had ever seen. So he's going to be remembered as a crotchety old man who didn't realize when he could have hung it up. The Democrats could have had a primary. They could have had a real contest. All of the weaknesses we've seen in Harris probably would have at least gotten exposed during the primary, and Democrats would have had a choice. They would have had an option. If he loses, he's going to, the legacy of Joe Biden will be the guy who merely delayed the second term of Trump, not the guy who stopped him. And I think that will, between that and everything else on foreign policy and domestic policy, economics, and all that other stuff, he will not be remembered fondly, other than a few isolated corners of Delaware and maybe Scranton.
So you're saying, other than the dismal record on foreign and domestic issues, the fact that he didn't know that he needed to get out, and his
senility?
Other than that, he's read the situation perfectly.
And the play was great, Mrs. Lincoln. You just didn't notice it. So.
Yeah, that's entirely right. So what is Harris doing? Well, we'll talk about that later in the podcast, because that ain't working either. But that's our crazy martini. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And yesterday was the big Madison Square Garden rally for Trump in New York City, obviously. And, everybody on the left is trying to paint this as kind of the replay of this 1939 Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. Left-wing media out there that were certainly trying to make that comparison in a number of ways. Trump has this really long lineup, and at most of his rallies, there's a fairly long lineup of speakers. I think it was definitely longer than normal even at Madison Square Garden. And so Melania actually made an appearance. Elon Musk spoke, RFK Jr., lots and lots of people. But clearly, the Trump campaign didn't think this list of speakers was complete without checking notes. Tony Hinchcliffe. Apparently, he's a very popular podcaster. Yesterday was the first day I had heard of him. And so he's trying to be edgy, I guess, in his comedic routine. This part, I think, was clearly scripted based on how he led into it. And here's what he had to say about Puerto Rico.
There's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
And he made other comments about how Latinos have lots of babies because they don't know how to prevent pregnancy. And then it's like the same thing as them coming into the country. They don't know how to get out. And there were other comments in there as well. So, Jim, you and I know each other well. We banter back with, Greek jokes and Irish jokes once in a while. But if you're the Trump campaign and you feel like you've got this momentum going on your side, this is an own goal. And I know a lot of people are saying, it's a guy nobody's heard of. It's not like Trump said it, and on it goes. But the media is rolling with it big league, so that could potentially eat into your momentum. And also, you've got Rick Scott, who's in a pretty tight Senate race down there in Florida, tweeting yesterday, "This joke bombed for a reason. It's not funny and it's not true. Puerto Ricans are amazing people and amazing Americans. I've been to the island many times. It's a beautiful place. Everyone should visit. I will always do whatever I can to help Puerto Ricans in Florida or on the island." I have seen some reports saying they do have a trash issue, but it doesn't seem like it was a good place to inject that into the campaign. And Kamala's already trying to make hay on this issue on social media. And so don't know what the damage, if there will be significant damage, will be here, but it's clearly something that could have been avoided if they had done just the slightest bit of vetting here. So we'll see if there's anything more than that.
Yeah, I wrote about this in the first part of today's Morning Jolt, and lots of people hated it, and I don't care. Because I don't think I don't find that stuff funny to begin with. I really don't think you should do it when you're trying to help elect Trump. And oh, by the way, the media is looking for any excuse to portray it as Nazis. And it wasn't just comments about Latinos, and it wasn't just comments about Puerto Ricans. going to quote this directly because I don't want to get this misquoted. But here's, let's say, we're supposed to be this new racially diverse working class party. He's, pointing to some guy in the crowd. He says, "It's cool, black guy with a thing on his head. What the hell is that, a lampshade? Look at this guy. Oh my goodness, wow. I'm just kidding. That's one of my buddies. He had a Halloween party last night. We had fun. We carved watermelons together. Watermelons. All right? I think people get that reference there. Then a little bit later on, he says, Ukraine versus Russia, Israel versus I noticed he didn't finish the word Palestinian, but whatever. That's like bad soccer games. Who even cares? Well, there are a lot of people who care about both of those conflicts. And I realize he's a comedian. He's not a foreign policy. But fine. Then he goes on further. They should all settle it through rock, paper, scissors. The Palestinians are going to throw that rock every time. I'm going to give a little, like a molecule of credit, for all the rock throwing we've seen during Palestinian protests. But then he goes on to say, the Jews have a hard time throwing that paper. You know what I'm saying. So it wasn't just Latinos and Puerto Ricans. He also chose to make fun of blacks and Jews. This is a terrible idea. This is a terrible idea because if you can't grasp that this is not the time, place, and venue and circumstance to make fun of minority groups, then you are denser than osmium. I looked it up. It is the densest element that is out there. And this is the purpose of, like, what are we trying to do here? Allegedly trying to get people to vote for Donald Trump. This is supposed to be saying we are not this old stodgy, you want to say, we're not an old stodgy, white-dominated party, fine. But to have a white comedian up there going out and making fun of minority groups, that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't move the ball in the right direction by any stretch of the imagination. It is, Jim, you don't have a sense of humor. I know I'm going to get every one of those responses. I don't care. There are certain things you're just not supposed to do. And I just don't think it's a good idea to make fun of minority groups. Certainly not in circumstances like this. And just mind-boggling that nobody in the Trump campaign could recognize, that anyone thought this was a good idea. And I'll give credit, it's not like the crowd loved him, but I didn't hear a cascade of boos coming down on him for any of those jokes either. So I think it's a terrible look for the Trump campaign. I don't think this is necessarily going to move any, I don't think it'll move any states. I don't see it being a huge factor, but you just handed the opposition a stick to hit you with. And the old excuse of, you don't have a sense of humor. Look, could you begrudge anybody, any Puerto Rican for not liking the reference to their island being a floating pile of garbage? Could you begrudge any Latino for not liking some guy going up on stage and joking that they breed a lot? Come on. So anyway, I am appalled by this, and I know that everybody's going to call me this, humorless scold, and that somehow it's cancel culture for saying that, this stinks and he shouldn't have done it. Whatever. Hey, it's your guys' campaign. Good luck with it.
Well, you're giving the other side ammo. It's never a good idea, especially a week and a half before an election. And, the left was flailing badly. Tim Walz was also comparing it to the Nazi rally of 1939. I saw other places saying that, this is the fact that they're filling up the arena is a chilling parallel to 1939. I'm like, well, what does that make Billy Joel?
Weren't they just bragging about what great crowds they had at their arenas? Wasn't
right?
I think Churchill had some good crowds too. I think that.
Yes. So when you see them flailing like that, don't give him any ammo. And that's clearly what Hinchcliffe did. And I don't know if they looked at his comments, his routine or not, but obviously that was something that they could potentially regret. All right, well, let's check in on the Kamala Harris campaign. They don't want anything to do with Joe Biden in public. They don't want a shot of her and the current president in a Trump ad in the last final days of the campaign, of them on the trail together. So what is Kamala Harris doing? Well, she's barnstorming as best as possible, I guess. But the closing arguments in her campaign are really odd. First of all, it's abortion pretty much all the time. If you saw the clips from the rally down in Houston, the one where the Democrats did another bait and switch on a Beyonce performance. This time she actually showed up, unlike the convention, but she did not perform. She gave a very short speech, and basically she said her most important thing as a mother is to make sure that her children don't give birth to her grandchildren if they don't want to. So that's kind of an odd moment. But then up in Michigan, in Kalamazoo, they brought out Michelle Obama, who basically tried to take men to the woodshed and browbeat them for not voting. Really, the issue is abortion here. She didn't specifically say it in this clip, but it's pretty obvious what she's talking about.
But to anyone out there thinking about sitting out this election or voting for Donald Trump or a third-party candidate in protest, because you're fed up. Let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage. So are you as men prepared to look into the eyes of the women and children you love and tell them that you supported this assault on our safety?
So, Jim, as we've said before, in recent days on the Three Martini Lunch, there's nothing that male voters appreciate more than that message that you're not a real man, or you hate your wife or your daughters or your sisters if you don't sign on. And how dare you be fed up with this horrible status quo that we have in this country? So I'm not sure that scolding is the right message, but hey, if that's what they want to roll with, go for it.
Greg, is she questioning the masculinity of those who don't vote for Kamala Harris? First of all, we're not supposed to do that anymore, right? People can identify however they want to identify. It's not up to Michelle Obama to decide who's in which gender, okay? That's the first thing. I am appalled at how homophobic, transphobic, or whatever else phobic that counts as. Hey, I didn't make the rules. Culture's had this rule, this for a long time. A bit more seriously, Michelle Obama, some of us still remember when Barack Obama was winning the Democratic primaries, she said, "For the first time in my adult life, I'm proud of my country." And I'm like, really? Really? You never had any pride in your country until, and we can debate about what qualifies as the starting date for Michelle Obama's adult life. But you were going all well through the 80s, all through the 90s, all the way up through there. And there was nothing after 9/11, no pride, no patriotism, no swell. No, okay, all right. And I remember really being bothered by that, and a lot of people thinking that I was some sort of maniac or right-wing extremist for being bothered by that back in 2008. But there's been this attitude that Michelle Obama is the Democrats' secret weapon, that she always comes out and gives her convention speech. And by the way, I think this year she gave a good convention speech. But I do wonder if she really is this phenomenal political, that she has the fine touch that everybody believes that she does. Because statements like this, did she really think that she could hector? You could do one of two things. You could address why male voters seem skeptical of Kamala Harris, or you can try to berate them into voting. You could try to, attack them, attack their masculinity, and say that they hate their wives, they hate their daughters, they hate their mothers, you could basically say, well, all right, is there any reason guys might not like Kamala Harris? Let's look at her whole record. Let's look at this, the glee with which she was going to lock parents up for truancy and all of these other policies she's had over the years. Is there anything in there? Oh, by the way, gender gap has existed for a generation. So it's not like this just emerged out of nowhere. Traditionally, men prefer Republicans, women prefer Democrats, although really break down the numbers, married women are actually pretty fine with Republicans. It's single women who are overwhelmingly in favor of Democrats. Men, whether single or married, are generally pro-Republicans, and married women are more pro-Republican than single women are. So you look at that. Is it really that men have the problem here? Or is it maybe that, Kamala Harris has some serious weaknesses as a candidate? Maybe Harris has to address that. Or Michelle Obama could get up there and say, "I'm disappointed in you," which is kind of a similar message to what Barack Obama was doing earlier. That, all the number of times that Obama, both in his presidency and after his presidency, would lay out and say, "America, you have let me down. I'm like that. I'm in that father role. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed." Like we're supposed to live up to the Obama's expectations or something like that. It's really, look, you could say this is either a desperation move. You could say maybe something in the focus group says that messaging like this works. I have my doubts. Or is this preemptive spin for what they believe is going to be a Harris defeat? And is this a matter of, well, it's not that we Democrats did anything wrong. It's not that we had a bad candidate. It's that you Americans suck. You Americans did not live up to, you can't accept a candidate as good as Harris. And it's because you are such deplorables, you are such degenerates, you couldn't recognize the great candidate you had there. That's what I expect, if Trump wins, and like I said, I think it's still about 50-50 right about now, but if it comes to pass, you're going to see an enormous amount of Democrats concluding that, right back to where Michelle Obama was before Obama won the nomination, they will no longer be proud of their country. They will no longer see anything good in America.
No, very well said. And yes, if it's a day ending in Y, the Obamas are disappointed at us as a nation. Remember her convention speech where she was posing as still being in the middle class? That was very, very odd as well. And just last week, Obama, fresh off of his hectoring of black men for not being enthusiastic enough about Harris, was at a different rally saying, when did we get so bitter and divisive? And I'm like, look in the mirror, pal.
Gee, it's just a shame that from 2009 to 2017, there was nothing he could do to affect the political culture of this country.
Jim, 8 days to go. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, please tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Monday and join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.